Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. I work with people to help them step into effective leadership and realize their professional and personal goals. If you have known failure and success, if you have had good bosses and bad bosses, if you are a high achiever and want new ideas, and if you want the practical and tactical side of things, then you are in the right place. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. This episode is going to be for CEOs or executives who are guiding their teams through change. And we're going to talk about some effective communication strategies and how to leverage your chief of staff throughout that process. Change is constant. We all know this. In the business world, this can span from reorganizations to a market condition change to an industry regulation or a new delivery method of your product or service to your customers. All these things are happening around us all the time. Why is effective communication important, especially in these scenarios? First of all, it's just the nice thing to do, right? To keep people informed, to keep people comfortable, up to date, et cetera, et cetera. The second reason is important. If you don't keep people informed and communicate effectively, you lose productivity. Your workforce is not working to its optimal output. So if you think about a team member and their maximum output or top performance is 10, so 10 out of 10, and let's say that person doesn't feel like they're being told the full truth, doesn't trust the leadership team, it feels like they're about to get blindsided, you've automatically taken them down to like a 6 or 7. And if you extrapolate that across your entire org, that's a big delta. That's a big gap. You're leaving a lot on the table. So effective communication can help your teams and help your workforce perform at their top levels. Here are 3 key guidelines for effective communication in these scenarios. The first guideline, provide the why and the context. Why are we making this change? What is the context and background information for this decision? A lot of leaders I see will go out in front of a team and say, all right, guys, here's the change. We're going from this to that. I need you to go from this to that right now. And teams are like, okay, we can go from this to that, but why are we doing that? Why is that better? How does that help us, our team, our customers? So don't leave out that part. It's explaining the thought process behind that decision. Give them the full picture and allow them to connect the dots and understand, okay, that's how they got there. Got it. Second key guideline. There is one question that people always ask in change situations. When there's a big change, they always ask this question. What does that mean for me? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for my team? They will either ask this out loud to you, to your face, or they will ask it over and over and over again in their head in different ways. If you don't answer that, you leave a big gaping hole and people will fill that with their own answers. And usually they'll have some negative story or some wild, convoluted story about why this happened or what's about to happen. So if you can, answer that proactively, answer that preemptively. If you have an answer, then provide that. Third key guideline is consider the timing element. Timing is everything. So here are some things to consider. First of all, it's very likely that you and probably your leadership team will have been privy to this change or this upcoming decision for weeks, if not months in advance. And so understand that when you're announcing this to the team or all company, it's the very first time people are hearing about it. So you've had time to process and say, here's the pros and here's the cons, and here's the puts and the takes, and here's the options we're thinking about, and now we're going this way. Well, remember how you felt when you very first heard that for the first time. You might have been like, oh, okay, this is a thing. We need to rally around this, and I need to get my leadership team, like, what are we going to do about this? That's where they are now. So they might get that news and be like, okay, hold on, what is this thing? What are we talking about now? So understand and just remind yourself, okay, they have a different timeline. They're on a different timeline with this information than I am, and recognize that and respect that. Okay, so let's go through 3 real-life examples and talk about some of those key guidelines we just touched on. The first example would be, let's say you're bringing on a new C-suite team member. So a high-level hire, pretty strategic hire, and they're coming on to the company and they're brand new. The context for this decision and the why for this decision. This can vary. It could be, this is a brand new role that we've created for the company. Okay, great. Why do you think that's important for the business to have right now and going forward? Include that in your announcement. It could be this is a replacement for so and so who just got exited from the company, and that was pretty public and people knew what happened there. And in that case, one thing you can say is in the announcement, you can emphasize, okay, we have Phil coming on board as our new CRO. And Phil comes from the industry. He knows a lot of people and our customers are ready, and he's a great culture fit. We think he'll fit in really well with our team. And culture fit was a big thing we were looking for in the interview process. So we vetted for that pretty closely. That's a wink, wink. Like we know that the last person was difficult to work with, and we are making sure that we have a good culture fit as well as someone who is good at their job and competent at being CRO in that case. So that can be providing the context and why. What does that mean for me? Well, that varies. If you are now reporting to Phil, that's your new boss. What is Phil like? When can I talk to him? What's his work style? All of those questions. So some of those things can be preempted. And Phil is going to have a meet and greet at lunch today. So please join us in the conference room. Lunch and snacks will be provided, whatever it is. Okay. For the other C-suite members, that's a new colleague. That's one of their peers now. So how are the teams going to interact there? All right. Timing element. So for this one, it's very likely that the rest of the executive team, the C-suite members, will know that you are looking for a new CRO. In fact, some of them will likely be on the interview round, right? So they'll be aware of it well in advance. You might also talk to the VPs, the senior directors, the directors who are going to report up to the CRO in advance. So let's say the other person got fired. And so you bring them together and say, hey, we know you don't have a leader right now. Here's your interim go-to leader for questions and for HR admin pieces. But just know we're actively hiring. We're actively working to backfill this role. Okay, that makes sense for them. And then once Phil signs his contract, so make sure they have ink on paper and it's official, because I've seen people make announcements to their whole company and then something falls through. But once it's official, then make the announcement to the rest of the company, providing the relevant information there. So there can be different timing elements and different timing sequences there. The second real life scenario would be, let's say that you have decided to bring on private equity investors. Why did that happen? Well, the straightforward answer is you needed or wanted additional capital. What does that mean for me? This has a wide ranging answer. If you're a founder or a co-founder or a key executive, the day that that deal goes through could be life changing. Financially, it could be life changing. The type of role you have at the company could be drastically different. So that could be a huge, huge deal. If you're in middle management, well, like maybe there's some changes. Maybe I'm being asked for more reporting than I was before. Maybe things are at a little faster pace or a higher sense of urgency. But my whole life, my whole world hasn't changed. If I'm a rank and file entry level new hire, well, like, okay, I kind of see that announcement, but my day to day doesn't change. It's business as usual for me. So that answer varies greatly across the company. All right. And then timing wise, you're going to have executives and probably key stakeholders in the company be aware of this beforehand, because they'll be part of the due diligence and virtual data rooms and all these negotiations and questions. And then you'll probably have a sequence of things that need to happen once that deal gets closed. Sometimes you won't even know the deal got closed until 24 hours in advance, but you should have a plan to kick off all these things once that goes through. Maybe it's a press release. Maybe it's an announcement to strategic vendors that have to be informed with the majority stakeholder of your board changes. And then it's the all company announcement. So all these things have to springboard from that decision. So you want to sequence those things. All right. Third real life example. Let's say that you have to do a layoff round. So these are unfortunate, but they do happen. So a layoff round or a RIF, reduction in force. The why behind it is usually fairly straightforward, which is we didn't have the revenue we needed, or the economy took a downturn, or some combination. I would also, if you can, include, look, the reason we did this is because we exhausted every other option. This was our absolute last resort. So I would package that in your messaging as well. What does this mean for me? So obviously this is a really big deal if you're getting laid off. So here's your severance package. Here's what that means to you. Maybe provide some EAP, employee assistance program. This is what it means for you. Here's your next step. And for those who are are left behind who have not been cut, it's what does that mean for me? Maybe the team's been consolidated into two teams now become one. Maybe your boss just left. Maybe you have more work and we're rearranging priorities and projects so you can take on the additional work that your colleagues were helping with. So what does it mean to me reverberates across the company in different ways. I want to talk about the timing element of this one. This is interesting. During COVID, when I was chief of staff, all the executives had an impromptu, all hands meeting when this thing broke out. And one of the questions we got was, are there going to be layoff rounds? And the true answer, which we shared, was it's an option on the table. So we were like transparent, like this, like we don't know what's happening. So it's an option on the table. It's the absolute last option. And here's the things that we have in place. We're going to flip these switches and pull these levers to give us some runway. So we don't have to do that if we don't have to. And we explained all of that. But the true answer was this is an option on the table. We decided to do that because, first of all, it was true. But secondly, it was not a distant option. So it was like, this is like sub 1%. We're never going to have to do this. It doesn't make sense to make people worried. It was like, no, this could become a thing. So we front run that, or we got ahead of that and told people so they could start getting used to the idea that that is an option on the table. And then if and when you have to announce a layoff round occurred, understand that's an emotional blow to people. So for those folks who are left behind, they are taking shock into their system. Here's what not to do. I've seen this happen. I've seen it go very badly when CEOs get up there and they announce the layoff and they try to make it positive. They try to put a really positive spin. And again, they've processed this. They know it's coming, but for some people, it's brand new information. And they do something like, all right, guys, we had a layoff round, but it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. It's actually a good thing for us because of X, Y, and Z. And we already have a 6-month plan, which is really exciting. So everyone get excited for the 6-month plan. Are you guys with me? Are you guys excited? People are sitting there like, whoa. First of all, you just laid off John, Lauren, and Kathy, who sit right by me. I worked with them. I went to lunch with them. And you're telling me it's a good thing that they don't have a job right now? Who the heck are you? I've seen this thing go really bad. So understand the timing element, meet people where they're at, and give them room to process and absorb the news and answer their questions. And that would be very much a follow-up sequence of meetings and calls and Q&As and pulse surveys and touch bases and getting your executives and your senior leaders dialed into, I need you plugged into your teams and I need real candid feedback about how people are doing. And here's a rough example, but it'll emphasize the point. If a close family member of yours was in a horrible accident and broke their back, and you rushed to the hospital and you walked in and you saw them like on the thing with the mask and with the neck brace and they can't move without excruciating pain, you're not going to walk in there and be like, this is actually a good thing. It's going to build your character. There's going to be blessings in disguise you can't see right now. And you're going to be fine. Like in 18, 24 months, you're going to be fine. Well, all of that might be true, but is it helpful right now? No. So pick your timing and make sure that you're meeting people where they're at. All right. So taking those 3 key guidelines and 3 real life examples, how can you leverage a chief of staff in these change scenarios? All right. So in all the scenarios I described, there was a thought process and there was a plan. You were conveying that to an audience. In order to convey that, you have to have those things. So a chief of staff can help you come to a good decision. They can help the team say, all right, let's put all the cards on the table. What do we got here? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the puts? What are the takes? What are the options or opportunities or perspectives we might not be seeing? Working through all of that with the leadership team. And then when a decision has to happen and when a change has to occur, it's all right, what is the absolute best way to roll this out and announce this to the company? So thinking of what does this mean for different teams? What are the effects to workflows? All these different plans and contingency plans, they can help put that together. A chief of staff is perfectly suited for this kind of stuff because they are a high-level strategic leader and they're in all of those conversations and they're part of that discussion and that decision. And then they also can operationalize that strategy and operationalize that decision. So they can deploy it tactically and practically throughout the organization. And when I say throughout, I do mean throughout. So at all levels of the org, which is important. So not just your senior leadership, like they're on board, your middle management, your rank and file folks, all levels of the organization, all across your organization. So not just, all right, finance and operations are well informed, but what about marketing and sales operations and legal and finance and supply chain and all these different areas? You want to make sure across the company, company-wide, cross-department, this thing is coordinated. A chief of staff is well suited and in perfect position to help lead that or spearhead that initiative. So use them, leverage them in the planning process for sure. I would also highly recommend using your chief of staff for the ongoing subsequent communication, meaning you are probably going to be on point for the initial announcement, perhaps the all hands, and maybe some of the breakout sessions afterward. But a chief of staff can plan something like this. All right, here's the plan, make this announcement. So the CEO is going to take point, and then immediately afterward, the C-suite members go to breakout sessions with their respective divisions and departments and talk about what that change means in more detail and more specifics for that group. And making sure that the messaging is aligned from what the CEO is going to say to the questions we think we're going to get in these breakout sessions, and making sure everyone is prepared for those, on board for those, in the right headspace for those. And that's the initial kickoff. And then the chief of staff can have these ongoing side conversations where you could have nuanced communication. And here's what I mean by that. A CEO in front of the entire company is going to give one kind of message. Very valuable, very important. If after that meeting, someone pulls the chief of staff aside in the hallway and says, Emily, like, what does this mean over here? What does this mean for us? That conversation is very different. So some of the same sentiments might be conveyed, but it can be more specific and more personal. Like, hey, Joe, here's how we thought about it for your team. And specifically for you, here's what we're looking for. We need some feedback from you and your team on this, and this in the next week or two. And in the ongoing months, we are going to be looking at these data points. So if you and I can keep in touch and you can feed me that stuff and just make sure your manager is aware of that, that would be really helpful. Like those types of conversations and interactions can happen. A chief of staff can go into a team meeting and maybe a manager brings the chief of staff in to just have an additional layer of Q&A. And that chief of staff who has been part of those strategic discussions, who that team knows the chief of staff has the ear of the CEO and the executive team, can answer those questions with authority, with influence, and with a high level of knowledge. The chief of staff is very cool because it also advocates for that team. They want what's best for that team. And so listening and really hearing, all right, we rolled out this change. How is that working for you on the ground? What are some things that are going well? Let's keep doing those. What are some things that like aren't working the way we intended? Wasn't any ill will, but just aren't working out how we intended. What are your ideas to change that? A lot of times in these conversations, the chief of staff will get Maria saying, hey, Emily, I know what you guys were trying to do. I know what we're trying to do here because the CEO explained the context and the why, and you've explained the what we're trying to accomplish, but the how you outlined is not actually the best. What I think we should do is this, and this, and over here. Oh my gosh, you're right. That's right. Thank you for bringing that up. You're closer to it. That's a great idea. We're going to implement that. Let me bring that back to the team and make sure that's official and communicated upward to the executive team. All of those types of things can happen in those subsequent follow-up conversations. And you probably know this as a CEO or a high-level executive. Most people talk to you a little bit differently because of your title. It's just human nature. They just kind of react to you differently. And so when you ask a question and you truly want candid feedback, sometimes you get a real answer and sometimes you get the sugar-coated version. A chief of staff going into these more casual, informal settings can get more candid feedback and filter that and sift through what are some helpful and relevant themes to go back up to you and leadership team with. So all of those nuances, all of those different side conversations are really helpful to have your chief of staff on point for. Okay, 2 last notes or themes that I'll leave with you as we wind down here. First of all, there's always going to be people who are resistant to change. So if you're leading your team through change, as you lead your team, you have to get in front and lead them. But no, there's always going to be a group of people, hopefully a small subset, who, no matter what you say, no matter how well you prepare or deliver it, they're always going to grumble and complain. So just know that's going to happen. You're going to have detractors and you have to keep moving forward anyway. Your main mission is to mobilize the organization and and pull people ahead, not at a breakneck pace or not at a violent shove off of a cliff, but just like keep moving one step in front of the other. We're going to get through this. Here we go. Here's the opportunities. Oh, here's where you see the benefit of this, and just keep people moving forward. So that's your job, to guide your team through this. The second main theme that I leave you with is don't be scared of change. Human beings don't like uncertainty. And so oftentimes we as individuals, myself included, will be like, oh, something is changing. I'm not sure what it is. I'm automatically going to slap a negative label on it. Oh, that's bad. When in reality, change in and of itself is neutral. There's lots of things in life where it's A versus B, not good versus bad or right versus wrong. With option A, you have pros and cons. And with option B, you have pros and cons. It's just different. And so being objective in that sense and saying, okay, yeah, like option B, we move to this, and the cons of this, like this part of it really does suck, but we have some opportunities, we have some options we didn't have before, we have some open doors, and let's focus on those things and be fair in our assessment of those things as well. So don't be scared of change. Make sure you have a good way to process change for yourself. So if your default reaction is, oh no, it's bad, and adopting like a defensive crouch position, well, make sure you're getting your headspace right. Make sure you have a clear, objective level picture of what that change really represents, because you're going to be in better position to lead your team through that if you have gone through that process yourself and gotten yourself right with it. Use some of these things we talked about to guide your teams through change. Use some of these key guidelines for effective communication, and certainly tee your chief of staff up to help you throughout this process. If you have a question on anything that I talked about, or you have a specific scenario you want to go through, then feel free to reach out to me for a free 30-minute clarity call. The link is in the show notes as always, but I hope that you have a strong foundation of trust built up across your organization. I hope you have some robust communication channels already set up and that are already working and feeding you real-time information, and you're able to disseminate messages out throughout your org and it's landing in the way that you intend. And I hope that you have a chief of staff that you are leaning on and relying on and putting in a position where they can tactically execute and operationalize your strategy. I will catch you next week on Leveraging Leadership.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.